Hello and welcome to your Line of Duty Series 6 Episode 7 review. It is the series finale, but is it really the end? Is it not just the series finale? Is it the end of Line of Duty altogether? And if so, what in the blue hell do you guys make of that? As always, I want your correspondence in the comments below. The most divisive finales of the whole show, probably of the whole show, especially if this does in fact turn out to be the last one, which I know the writer-creator has hinted at. But Twitter, of course, as always, has been going wild. A lot of people are convinced that because of the open-ended nature of this ending, then there will be a Series 7 to tie things up once and for all. But others are convinced that no, this is just the way they've chosen to end it, and that's that. There won't be any Series 7. So let's see what you think in the comments below. But see, I've been really positive on the series overall. I think it is the best series, at least since Series 3. I don't know if that's a popular opinion, an unpopular opinion, but I'm putting it out there. I've loved this series. And the finale definitely is divisive. I can see both sides of that. This certainly has been a high energy sort of series. So I'll talk about those scenes in this episode first, because early in the episode, Jo Davison is mysteriously moved from her prison cell. She's the prison wardens who come to pick her up claim that you're wanted for more interviews down at Hillside, and you can tell by Jo's body language and reaction she sort of smells a rat, and she's put in the back of the van. We see those familiar wardens. AC-12 twig this because they hear of it. What tips them off that there's definitely foul play is that it's claimed Chloe finds out that it was Kate who supposedly signed the order to release her and to intercept the van, and they basically make it so that they cut the van off and then they implant two officers to make it look like there's no sort of foul play, and so that there's no like traces, I guess, of AC-12 like intercepting. But they cut it off, and we get one of these like high dramatic like action type scenes that we've had a few of this series. So they basically rescue Jo from what appears a certain fate, if you like, and they go to interview her in the next scene. Jo again looks really petrified. Great acting from Kelly MacDonald. I know there's been some doubts over her performance this series, but I think certainly these scenes where Jo has been clearly very shaken up and very nervous, MacDonald definitely has delivered on those moments. There's no doubt about that. He says to her, "You're now safe. We can get you into witness protection. They can't really harm you from this point on." But she sort of puts that on condition if Jo reveals who H is, who the top man is, and then it's the person who knew her father, who knew Tommy Hunter. And Kate says, who was it? It's because Jo has hinted that Tommy for a long time said that this man was in fact her father. So Kate says, "We can promise you a new life under witness protection if you give us the name." And it's kind of interesting because they leave that open-ended and they go to like another scene. And in the next scene, Hastings asks them if you've got any further, and they say no. But then I think because now there's other evidence involved, but I'm assuming that maybe Jo did say something at some point just because by the end of the episode, she has put in witness protection, basically. That's kind of her end of her story. At least as far as this season goes. I mean, who knows, they could sort of bring her back for another series. Although Kelly MacDonald might be hard to get for two. But in any case, we do see her at the end when they're rounding things off in witness protection in another relationship, which is nice. But yeah, obviously AC-12 are satisfied that she's not a bent cop, then she was just got in with the wrong crowd and were kind of pressured into doing it. But because we do see her in witness protection at the end, it does make me sort of believe that maybe she said something. We build to this big reveal of this potential H, because what happens is, again, near the start of the episode, Chloe's been in touch with the Spanish authorities. They confirm that the bodies found were in fact Thirlwell and his wife. But evidence seems to be that then it was some sort of frame up. Then obviously whoever H is, whoever framed Thirlwell as H, cyber sort of evidence that this happened, then Thirlwell was framed as H. So obviously, I guess, depending on your point of view, disappointed that we don't get any further cameos from James Nesbitt. He doesn't physically appear in the show, if you like, which I kind of like, I've got to say, because I just love how cheeky it is and just how it's playing with the audience. The fact that you cast James Nesbitt and then you don't actually, essentially, he doesn't have to do any acting. I kind of like that, playing with us. Put together this cyber evidence that they actually bring in the fact that the message to Joe with the word definitely was in fact misspelt. So who's the Muppet who misspelt it, eh? Well, they start comparing notes and they start comparing past cases, and they actually showed that there's a case from way back in, I think they said 2003, where someone had also misspelt definitely, and they connect it to the case in 2019. Again, I think the direction of some of the dramatic scenes in this series have been really good, and this is another great example, because they cut the guy in question in. It's, you know, he comes in with an armed guard, and we get a shot at Carmichael, which is a classic sort of icy stare, staring into like Hastings' eyes. Cuts around all the characters, basically. I mean, it could not have like dragged this out any more, but in such a brilliant dramatic way, because the guy comes in and sits down, but you don't see his face. It cuts around the different characters, and it is that Muppet Buckells, our favourite douchebag, our favourite golf-wielding douchebag, because yes, of course, the Brummie education system has let him down. He's the one who can't spell definitely. Or is he? Is he? I don't know. You tell me, folks. Because let's get into this, shall we? We get a really entertaining, solid interview scene where they press him. Do you order Davison to be moved from her prison cell? Did you order Kate Fleming to be killed? Obviously she's not dead, but did you order it? Did you order the murder of Gail Vera, etc., etc.? And they have all this evidence stacked against him, and Buckells at first keeps saying no comment to most of it, and there's Hastings goes on this rant basically about you did it all for greed. You know, there was no like grand underhanded like big dramatic reason for it. It was just plain sort of greed. And Buckells at this point is almost like they gored him into a response, because he sort of turns around and has that like classic Buckells like smirk, and he says or whatever it is, you know, you're the one who well, I'm the one who made mugs of you, basically. And bear in mind, mugs, he says the word mugs because that's going to come back later on, which I absolutely love about the scene. Buckells uses the fact that Carmichael isn't in the room, but that's taken over and is closing down AC-12. So he uses that as leverage and says, well, I'm only going to tell you what you want to know if you give me immunity, if you give me like witness protection. Story that he was just, he was just a tool, basically. He's not the top man. He says that was the top man, and then it got passed around. He mentions, he says Furwell at one point, but various people, but he was never the top man. He was just taking orders, and obviously, Ted is still like, he's furious, he's pissed. He gives all these speeches about, well, you still must feel some responsibility. But I really like the way that they turn it around on Buckells at the end of the scene, because they say to him, well, without full cooperation, of course, we can't give you immunity, we can't give you protection, and Buckells won't go any further, he won't say any more. So he's arrested, basically. He goes into custody, and it goes forward to a court case. And by the end, we're not sure. It's not 100%. I think the writers want us to believe that it's Buckells, but I have my doubts. I really don't think it is Buckells. But let's just to say one thing about the idea that it could be Buckells. I think it's really clever writing, and I tell you why. Because earlier in the series, it like they were pointing to Buckells, but then it was heavily pointing to. I mean, obviously, in the grand scheme of things, you could maybe tell Joe was taking orders, but in any case, a lot of the focus for the middle of the series was on Joe and exactly what she was up to. Buckells for a long time just seemed like this like incompetent sort of douche. I think it's really clever the way they've sort of like, he's been in the margins, so to speak. He's been on the fringes of things, and then he's brought back into the big picture in this episode. I think that is generally good writing, and I think that is generally like subverting expectations and what have you, because he does seem like small fry, and he's been written so well as small fry, then it's sort of hard for you to imagine then this guy is the mastermind. Now, I'll leave you guys to decide if he is the mastermind. I don't think he is. I'm not buying it for a moment. I think they want us to believe it's Buckells, but I don't think it is. And be the perfect irony, the perfect dramatic irony, if the series ended and they don't find out who the fourth man is. Now, I think certain people in AC-12, our main characters, seem to be quite convinced that it's Buckells. I think Hastings certainly believes it's Buckells. I'm not sure if Kay and Steve do, but I get the impression. I mean, probably with Hastings, because he's so personally involved, and he obviously wants to get the right man, but I think he probably is more emotionally involved. So in a way, he's maybe more desperate than it is Buckells. Sorry, but I don't buy it. I don't think Buckells is H, and therefore I don't think we've found H. The thing they do, which when they come up at the end telling us what's what, basically, is that they say that there's a lawsuit, Buckells going to trial, basically, and the lawsuit is to try and suppress any suggestion that there's corruption in the police force, because Osborne gives this big speech at the end where they say, well, we've now closed the Gail Vera case, we've arrested the right suspect, but any suggestion of police corruption is absolute rubbish. There's no evidence to back that up. Carmichael herself says at one point, then it's going to a jury now. It's up to the trial to decide. As far as I'm concerned, Buckells is probably just an incompetent police officer. And Ted actually has a good comeback to that, where he says, well, but really such an incompetent police officer has been allowed to raise through the ranks because of this, this sort of bent, this useless kind of system. So sort of throws it back to her. But again, Carmichael has been such a brilliant character, such a brilliant heel, if you like, with her like rebuttals of there being any police corruption. One of the big subplots in the episode is involving Ted, because this is his final day on the job, and part of the tension is that time's running out, and that he still could be H, he could still be the top man. And I have to say, the same as I thought in Series 5, I never thought that was the case. I think there was a bit more doubt this series, maybe just because they came back to it and it was a bit later in the series this time, but even so, I wasn't convinced that it was H. I just couldn't see it with this character, and I just found it a bit unlikely that he would pursue it so hard, if he was really H. So if I have a small complaint, that might be with that, just because they've gone back to that beat, which they did in Series 5. And there's a scene where Steve and Kate mention to Ted that they know about the stuff with Stephanie and his links to John Corbett. Scene because they both sort of say, or I think it's Kate that makes the point, that and stuff, then anything which makes us look bad, which makes AC-12 look bad, can be used against us. And that's when they bring up the stuff with Steph and with Corbin from last series. Answers, he says that to explain one half of the bag of money is that he was basically told it was one thing when it turned out to be something else. And Steve pushes him on the other half, and he says, well, I honestly just thought it was the right thing to do, to give it to someone who's now a widow and someone who has 2 children. And sort of pushed again, he then confesses that he has a personal link, that he actually had a relationship with a woman who turned out to be John's mother. But the way he acted before he knew this information, when he legitimately thought that John Corbett was bent himself, and his actions with the tip-off led to John being killed, and he feels personally responsible. And obviously it became very personal when he found out the link. Steve obviously by this. As I said, it's a pretty solid scene for the characters, because they sort of talk about loyalty. Because I think one of them says, "Well, we could have revealed this, we could have made this public, but we did it out of loyalty." And I think Ted sort of has a bit of a hit back, because about Steve's drug addiction, didn't suspend you. I didn't make this a criminal matter. I sort of just recommended therapy sort of thing. So how's that for loyalty? So stuff I feel could have been a bit better, could have been a bit more convincing, and it's only really a small complaint, but just the fact that they sort of went to the well with Ted last season on this. So almost to repeat it, I know they expand on it and they do quite a good job, I guess, but I think maybe it's just a bit shaky. I have to say that the stuff with Ted, for the most part, I love in this episode, and I have loved in this series. And again, if this is the final episode and the send-off for Ted and AC-12, I don't think they could have done it any better. Certainly the final scene of the episode and the way Ted leaves, because he says to Carmichael, I've put in a complaint and I'm asking for my reinstatement. And it's just as he's about to leave, he walks back into Carmichael's office and he confesses to his part in the John Corbett thing and how he feels responsible for Corbett getting killed. And it's sort of Carmichael's response is interesting because she keeps like her like cold, detached demeanor where she's like, well, what do you want me to do with this information? And this is where Hastings and Aidan Darvine absolutely nails the delivery and nails the whole theme of this series, where he basically says, that's up to you, but whatever you do, make sure you do it because you believe it's right. And make sure you do it because you carry the fire and I love the fact that they come back to that line. Actually forget from the Buckells scene, it ends with them saying don't make mugs of AC-12. I should have went back to that. No one makes mugs of AC-12. So you can see these certain lines and beats that maybe nod to the fact this could be the end, just because, for better or for worse, even though they haven't maybe quite succeeded and they are being shut down, AC-12 are at least going out with their heads held tight in this scene with Carmichael, because he does the right thing. He confesses about this and he leaves with his head held high. And it's sort of interesting whether Carmichael would press this any further, because in a way she might quite enjoy having this over Ted and something she could use, but also at the same time maybe she doesn't want to. Like if she does know things, then maybe she just wants to shut down all suggestion of police corruption, and might be a bit worried that if she presses this and tries to, prosecute against Ted, then it could open up a link to police corruption. A really good ending, I'll say that. Regardless of, I can understand the mixed feelings about the finale. Up a few things they do near the start of the episode. They get a box in the floor of the warehouse. They see a weapon inside it, and it's a weapon which can be linked to the scene of the Gail Vera murder. Fingerprints are wiped, but they find the DNA matches to Banks, so they need to fit up Banks. Not fit him up, wrong word, but to convict him. So that seems to be pretty clear cut. Then he is the murderer of Gail Vera, and they get a couple of other like things that link, for example, Ryan to a couple of killings. So that sort of kind of ties that up. There's an interesting beat actually, because it's Chris who reports this back to them, and Steve presses him about, well, is there anything else that like implements certain other hires up, such as Osborne, and Chris legitimately looks surprised. Now Chris is another one who I know there has been fans online have thought, could he, or there's been theories, could he be H, or could he know more than he lets on? And that's something I wondered, but I don't know, he might just be one of these sort of in-between type characters who have been made to look purposely a bit shadier than he actually is. But there's some personal stuff with Steve and Kate. There's a nice scene with them in the pub, actually. I really like that. Where actually she is almost pushing him to pursue Steph, because it's like, hey Steve, you're going to end up on your own at this rate, mate. So that's a nice scene. And I think another thing that's interesting, if this is the finale of the whole thing, is you do have these open-ended plot strands. Steve's is like open-ended because now that AC-12 have been disbanded, he's almost free to pursue a relationship with Stephanie. But he obviously has his doubts still if it's the right thing to do. Ambiguity with Kate and her sexuality a little bit, because people online have shipped her and Joe this season, me included. it's never been confirmed actually that she has feelings for Joe, or that there's been any like relationship between them. Just little hints of subtle hints, I'll say, but it could have been more just a close sort of friendship. Um, so that's interesting stuff. And one nice little sort of twist I did like is the fact that we see Kate go to a therapist, the same one actually. Good actor. I've seen that actor in lots of stuff, but the one who we see Steve talking to earlier in the episode, it turns out Kate has been going to, and so that's quite nice reveal. Endings where they do leave it open ending, but we do get this fitting sort of like imagery of that's all the links to the corruption cases being taken down. So we see the various characters, Tony Gates, Rose, all the various like links, the Keira Knightley character. Keira Knightley, Freudian slip, Keeley Hall's character, all the various characters taken down. Beautifully done. As I said, I can understand the sort of ambiguity and the feeling of, well, that was a bit of a cop-out. There was no clear-cut finish to the thing, and we've been left with more questions than answers. I totally get that response from the internet, but I will just say, if there's no Series 7, then I think I can understand that a bit more. But I think there will be a Series 7. I'm just going to say that. I know for some this feels like the end. I think it's just a closing of a chapter, and there will be more. I mean, hell, they could do a Twin Peaks and come back in 26, 27 years where Hastings is practically in a wheelchair. But they could do that just for real effect, just for a real shock. 26 years later, Line of Duty, The Return, Young Clothes Files, or something. The thing to say is I do think then there is actually a power to this, to the ambiguity, and to ending on such an open ending. The only reason I think this could be the end, if it is because of that image of them shutting down, of AC-12 being disbanded, and because of Hastings going out on such a high sense of how in the real world you can't really beat police corruption because it is so deep rooted, and all you can do is win cases and slowly sort of chip away of it. So there's a sense of the power of that, the fact that AC-12 are shut down and they get some answers, but ultimately they don't get to the root of it. They don't convict the fourth man, the final man, and they don't ultimately prove it. What I'm saying here is I think there's actually something quite ballsy if this is the end. But I don't think it is. I think there will be a Series 7, and I think they will move in a different direction. I do have some questions to leave you with before I finish this review. First of all, simple one, is Buckells really H? I don't think so. Second, how much does Carmichael know? Who doesn't want to believe that the corruption within the police, or is she really part of it? Will there be a Series 7? I say yes, but I'm not totally convinced. And will there be a spin-off? Because that's another, if they want to continue it but in a different way, that's one option. And I think there could be a spin-off, and they're very popular nowadays, and I'm going for a Chloe spin-off. There's lots of potential in a Chloe spin-off. I think she's been a really strong character this season. But obviously she's always going to play second fiddle to the usual suspects. More ground to explore Chloe and her background. And I know there's been certain rumours about her on the internet, as could she be Tony Gates' daughter? It looks like that's been disproved, at least for the time being, but I guess that's something they could still come back to. But how about a Chloe spin-off? How about the Thelma and Louise spin-off with Kate and Joe? Wouldn't that be fantastic? Although Joe seems quite happy at the end of this one, so maybe you don't want to rock the boat. And I do have one random question, because I noticed when they were recapping last week, then Chloe actually shreds a photograph of Osborne, and it's when Carmichael watches her, and I was wondering why, because I didn't notice at the time that then it was Osborne she shredded the picture off. And I just wondered, does this make her look a bit suspect, the fact that Osborne is a potential lead to BH and she's like shredding it? Or did she just do it because Carmichael told her to, maybe, because they're shutting down AC-12? I just wondered that when I saw the recap. So yeah, interesting stuff, because I know there has been some rumours about Chloe obviously being a bit shady as well, which I hope isn't true, one way or the other. But there you go, that's my thoughts. So I'm mostly positive on the finale. I hope there is a Series 7, but overall, this has been one of the best series. I think I've loved how serialized it's been, how they've brought stuff back from the previous series, because I think it's just added to the mythology and to the overall art. Series 5 was lackluster. I think Series 5 might be the weakest series, but suddenly Series 5 looks stronger, I think, because of some of the stuff in this series. Watch Series 5 again now, then it might look stronger. But in any case, I think, as I said, this is the best series since Series 3, in my opinion. I think it's been really good. Nice to see Kelly MacDonald involved. She's been a good guest star, in my opinion. Generally been like 2-3 of the best episodes of the whole show. And that is something to say. That is something to write home about. So that's Line of Duty, Series 6. I'm really satisfied with it. Maybe a little mixed on the finale, but even so, there was plenty of great stuff from the finale as well. And I do know that there's going to be a new series from the writer-creator, which stars Steve himself and also Shariah Jones. So you've got two good cast members already in that one, and I look forward to that. That's probably something I'll cover on the channel as well. But thanks for listening. Thanks for taking part in these discussions the last few weeks. There's been some great responses. And I will just say, if you want to support the channel in any way, you can do just by donating to the PayPal account. Any amount, just a couple of dollars if you like. That'll do, really. Every little helps, as a certain supermarket chain would say. I'll put the link in the description. But thanks for listening, and I'll see you later. Goodbye.